Allahu Akbar, Alhamdulillah, Subhanallah, 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 Allahu Akbar, Alhamdulillah. Subhanallah, Allahu Akbar, Alhamdulillah, Subhanallah, Allahu Akbar, Alhamdulillah, Subhanallah, Allahu Akbar, Alhamdulillah, Subhanallah, Allahu Akbar, Alhamdulillah, Subhanallah, Allahu Akbar, Alhamdulillah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today I want to briefly touch on the concepts of failure. I've failed many times in my life. I've failed at business, I've failed at relationships, and I've failed morally. And it is not the results of failure, but the nature of the intent in Islam that determines the divine decree about the value of a particular endeavor. When we look at the Christian critique of the Islamic Jesus, salawatu alayhi wasalam, it seems like he's a failed Messiah. And when we look at the Sunni critiques of Sunniism, such as Shiism, Quranism, etc., it seems like the Prophet failed because if his companions were corrupt, then he could not have been 100% successful. And when we look at within Shiism, there are these imams who had various strategies, either hiding or subverting by entering the court, but ultimately many of them were killed. And so too were many prophets in the Jewish tradition as well. And it seems like these were failures, but ultimately it is the paradox of divine decree that we must contemplate, where things are allowed to go awry, and that doesn't mean that there's no light in the endeavor. And then paradoxically, in defeat, there is an inspiration towards a movement. So when we look at the attack of October 7th, it was strategically not very well thought out, and they were played by the Israeli intelligence, who knew what was going to happen and moved soldiers and let them fall into the trap of their own anger in order to justify a second Nakba. But then paradoxically, the martyrdom of so many innocent people in Gaza has transformed the public opinion about Zionism in a dramatic way. Likewise, when we look at the corruption of Islam from Muawiyah and primarily, and Marwan in conspiracy, and then the intermediate degrees of imperfection and other associates who had come to power, we could say that this was a failure of guidance by Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But there's a lesson in it for us. And ultimately, the effects of both the usurpation of the mission of Islam from the Prophet Muhammad and the usurpation of the teachings of Jesus, both through corrupted hadiths that attempted to immortalize this corruption and their particular material defeats, led to a backlash and a groundswell of inspired motivation that has had unquestionable historical impact. So when we contemplate our own struggles, our own attempts to gain traction, to get funding, to get followers, to get a spouse, to improve our own selves, and then we fall into sin through chronic addictive temptations. You must consider that you are rewarded for even temporarily resisting the temptation for the sake of Allah. And this may also apply to things that are halal. This is the premise of fasting as we enter Ramadan, or in the ambiguity of the fiqh around what is and is not acceptably zabiha or non-zabiha. So, for example, in Hanafi, if a Christian was involved in the chicken's processing into